My daughter told me not to show up at her graduation. She said she wanted the day to be about her chosen family. I stayed home that day, turned on the live stream, and watched a little till I saw her introduce her stepdad as her real dad. Then I turned it off. Years later, when she called me asking to help with grad school, what happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy stories like this, you want to be part of the 10% of our viewers who click on the like button. This really makes us happy. If you are yet to subscribe to our channel, kindly support us today by subscribing to this channel. This helps us to bring you more beautiful stories. It will be great to tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let's get into the details of the story. I used to think love looked like presents. Showing up, asking questions, being there for the milestones. But over time, I learned it's the quiet things. It's keeping the lights on in a dorm you've never seen. It's driving a second-hand truck long after it should have been junked because your money's going to someone else's textbooks. It's sending rent before your own groceries. That's how I loved my daughter. Not loudly, not perfectly, but consistently. I paid every semester, every meal plan, every laundry card refill. I didn't always get a thank you, but I told myself that was okay. She was busy, and I didn't need to be thanked for doing what a father is supposed to do. Still, over time, the calls got shorter. Her tone changed, less warm, more performative, like I was a duty she didn't want to fulfill anymore. I chalked it up to growing up, tried not to take it personally, and kept wiring the money anyway. I remember the moment I realized something had shifted for good. It was junior year. I had just sent over $2,000 for housing, last minute because there'd been some confusion with her lease, and I called to check if she got it. She answered on the third ring, distracted, laughing in the background with someone. "Yeah, thanks, Dad," she said quickly. "I really appreciate it. I gotta go though, we're doing a group dinner." She hung up before I could ask about her classes or if she needed anything else. That was the first time I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, and felt that strange emptiness in my chest. The kind you can't quite name yet. It wasn't hurt, not fully. It was more like I had become invisible to someone I once meant the world to. But I pushed the feeling down. Told myself it was temporary. Told myself she'd come back around. The call that broke me didn't come until her senior spring. I'd been asking for weeks. What day is graduation? Where should I sit? Can I bring flowers? Every time I brought it up, she dodged it. "I'm not sure yet," she'd say. Or, "I'll let you know once I get more info." I started to feel like I was asking for something unreasonable. Eventually, she called me out of the blue on a Thursday night, right as I was settling down to eat dinner. I remember the way her voice sounded, nervous, like she was bracing for impact. "Dad, listen, I want to talk to you about graduation." I froze mid-bite. "Okay," I said, cautious. "Go ahead." She exhaled loudly. "I'd rather you didn't come. It's really important to me that the day's about my chosen family. I don't want any awkwardness." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I just sat there, fork in hand, feeling like someone had turned the gravity off in the room. "So what does that mean?" I asked finally. She hesitated. "It means I don't want Mom's husband to feel weird. He's been there for me, and I want to honor that." I think I said, "Okay," before I even understood what was happening. She said thanks, hung up, and I stared at my untouched food until it went cold. I didn't tell anyone about the call. Not my sister, not my friends, not even my therapist. I felt too embarrassed, too humiliated. How do you explain that your child asked you not to come to one of the biggest days of her life? That she would rather pretend you didn't exist for the sake of keeping things comfortable with the man who married her mother? I wasn't even angry at first. I was numb. I sat on the couch that night, pulled up the graduation livestream link she'd emailed a week later, and tried to watch like some stranger in the crowd. She looked beautiful, radiant even. She wore that confident smile I always adored, the one she used to flash at me after piano recitals when she ran into my arms. But that day, she ran to someone else. She hugged him, tight, introduced him to her friends, and when the camera caught her whispering, "That's my real dad," I turned the stream off mid-sentence. I didn't need to hear another word. I walked to the drawer where I'd tucked away her graduation card, the one with 5 crisp $100 bills inside, folded and sealed, ready to be mailed. I opened it, took the money out, and quietly logged into my travel fund account. That money went toward a plane ticket to Montana for the summer. I'd always wanted to see the mountains. Always dreamed of sitting on a porch with no responsibilities, just me and the wind and the sound of nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't even get mad. I just redirected the money and went to bed early that night, feeling something inside me shift. Something final. I had loved her the best way I knew how, and it hadn't been enough. Or maybe it had, but just not in the way she wanted. And for the first time in my life as a parent, I realized I didn't have to keep giving just because she kept asking. I could stop. I had the right to stop. She made it clear she'd chosen her family, and I was not in it. I didn't expect the live stream to hurt as much as it did. I told myself it was fine, that I was honoring her wishes, keeping the peace, being the bigger person. But there's something humiliating about watching your own child's graduation from behind a screen, like some ghost that no one can see. I sat on my couch that morning with a cup of coffee I didn't even sip, staring at the glowing rectangle in front of me like it might offer me some sort of closure. I had put in all the years, all the effort, all the money, and this was what it had come to. A YouTube link and a politely worded email. "Here's the link in case you still want to watch," she'd written. No "wish you were here." No "thank you." No warmth at all. Just that cold little sentence, like she was doing me a favor. As if I hadn't helped build the very path she was walking across that stage. The ceremony dragged. It always does. Endless names being read, people cheering for strangers, cell phones in the air. But I kept watching, waiting for the moment her name would be called. I'd memorized it years ago when I filled out the first FAFSA form. It still made me proud just hearing it. My daughter. The one I raised after school when her mom was working late shifts. The one I stayed up with during flu season, holding her hair as she threw up, whispering it would pass. And for what? So she could parade another man in front of the world and call him real? I saw her in the crowd then, camera panning for just a few seconds. She looked radiant in her cap and gown, eyes scanning the audience for the people she had invited, the ones she decided mattered more. When she finally took the stage and the announcer read her name, she beamed, walked across like she owned the world, and then, on the other side, she ran straight into his arms. Her mom's husband, the man she met when she was 15. He hugged her like he'd earned it, and maybe in her eyes, he had. But I'll never forget what happened next. A small group of students and parents gathered around her, taking photos, cheering, doing all the things I had dreamed of doing. And she turned, smiling wide, and said clear as day, "That's my real dad." I remember freezing. Her voice was light, happy, like this was the most natural thing in the world. My stomach flipped. I stared at the screen, willing myself to have heard it wrong. But I hadn't. My daughter had erased me from her story, edited me out like I was a footnote. I turned the live stream off right there. Couldn't watch a second more. I sat in the silence of my living room, the hum of the fridge suddenly deafening. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Minutes? Hours? All I know is that something broke in me that day. Not just the illusion of being her father, but the belief that love alone would ever be enough. I got up slowly, every movement stiff, like I was waking from a bad dream. I walked over to the kitchen table where her graduation envelope still sat, addressed, sealed, and stamped. Inside was a card I'd written weeks ago, telling her how proud I was, how much I believed in her, how this was only the beginning. I hadn't meant it to be sentimental, just sincere. It felt laughable now. I tore it open, pulled the bills out, and tossed the card in the trash without reading it again. Then I sat down at my laptop, opened a new browser tab, and searched for flights. Montana had always been a quiet dream of mine. Open spaces, no obligations, just air and mountains and silence. I booked the trip that night. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't about running away. It was about choosing something, anything, that wasn't her. In the days that followed, people started calling. Her aunt, my cousin, a couple of old family friends who'd seen her post a photo on Facebook with the caption, "Surrounded by my real family today." No tag, no mention, no trace of me. "Why weren't you there?" they asked. Did something happen? I didn't answer. What was I supposed to say? That I'd paid every bill, every meal swipe, every single expense down to her senior portraits. and still got left off the guest list? That I'd watched from the sidelines like a stranger while another man was thanked for my work? I didn't want pity. I didn't want validation. I just wanted out. Out of the guilt, out of the role, out of the endless cycle of giving and hoping and being reminded that hope doesn't always pay off. The hardest part was realizing I hadn't just lost her. I'd lost the version of myself who thought she'd come back around. The man who made excuses for her coldness. Who believed that deep down, she still saw me as her dad. That man died in front of a laptop screen, watching his daughter walk into someone else's arms. And the man left behind. The one who booked that trip, the one who threw away the card. He was done pretending. Not just with her. With all of it. The forced conversations. The hollow birthdays. The obligatory I love yous that always felt like they had a timer on them. I had given her everything I had. And in the end, she chose someone else. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I chose me. 2 years passed. Not a word. Not a postcard. No birthday call. No message on Father's Day. She didn't check in during the wildfire evacuation near my neighborhood. Didn't ask if I was okay when I had that hospital scare last fall. Nothing. She was a ghost who had buried the memory of me, and I had accepted that. Not bitterly, at least not anymore, but with the kind of dull acceptance that follows deep, irreversible loss. I had stopped bringing her name up in conversation. Stopped checking her social media. Eventually stopped wondering if I should have done something differently. You can only keep your hand stretched out for so long before it starts to cramp and ache, and mine had gone numb a long time ago. So when the call came, I nearly didn't answer. I didn't recognize the number. It was from the city she lived in, and I stared at the screen as it buzzed on my desk like it was a trap. Something about it made my stomach twist. I let it ring. Then, just as it was about to go to voicemail, I picked up. "Hello," I said cautiously. There was a pause. Then her voice. Uncertain, slightly breathless. "Hi, Dad." That word. It didn't even sound right coming from her mouth. It hit me like a slap and a whisper all at once. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She kept talking, like she couldn't afford to pause. "I know it's been a while. I got into grad school. Public health, full ride for tuition, but not housing or books or meals," and she trailed off like she was waiting for me to jump in. I didn't. Not yet. My silence seemed to rattle her. "Anyway, I was wondering if you could help me out again. Just like some support until I get my first internship. I don't want to ask Mom again. Things are tight over there." It was the way she said again that got to me. Like I was just some ATM that had taken a long break. Like I hadn't paid for everything, until she decided I was no longer good enough to be seen. My fingers clenched around the phone, and I took a long breath. Not angry, not explosive, just steady, final. "You graduated from me the day you said I wasn't welcome," I said, my voice even. I respected that. "Keep walking." Silence. I could hear the breath catch in her throat. She wasn't expecting that. Maybe she thought time had softened me, that the man she cut off was still waiting around like a puppy hoping for a pat on the head. But I wasn't that man anymore. I had mourned him. I had buried him. "Wow," she finally said, voice sharp and wounded all at once. "Seriously? That's your response?" "I think it's fair," I replied. "You made a choice. You don't get to rewind now that it's inconvenient." She scoffed. "You're unbelievable. You're my father. You're supposed to be there." I didn't flinch. "And you were supposed to love me. But here we are." She hung up. "No goodbye?" "No, I'm sorry." Just a deadline and the sound of finality in my ear. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then slowly placed the phone down. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just felt clear. Clean even. Like I had finally stepped out of a fog that had been choking me for years. I had nothing left to give her, not because I lacked it, but because she no longer had the right to ask. She'd built a world where I didn't belong. Now she needed help, and she thought she could pull me back in like flipping a switch. But I wasn't a machine. I was a man. A tired man, but one who had finally learned that love without respect is a slow form of self-destruction. She didn't call back. Not that day. Not the day after. But someone else did. Her mother. That voice I hadn't heard in nearly 3 years came barreling down the line like a freight train. No hello, no build-up. Just rage. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped. "She's your daughter. She asked for help, and you shut her down like she's nothing. You think that makes you a man. I almost laughed. You're calling me about morals? That's rich. She was a kid when she made that decision, her voice cracked. She didn't know how to handle things, and you're just throwing her away. She was 22, I said coldly. Old enough to declare someone else her real dad in front of a crowd. Old enough to mean it. She needed you, she snapped. She needed me to disappear. I corrected. And I gave her exactly what she asked for. She fell silent then. For a moment, I thought maybe she understood. But no, you're just bitter. And selfish. There it was. The word. The accusation that always follows when a parent decides they're done being used. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I just said, "Don't call me again," and hung up. Then I blocked her number. There are moments in life that don't feel like choices. They feel like gravity. This was one of them. I didn't owe my daughter anything more than what I'd already given. Not because I didn't love her, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop letting that love be weaponized against me. The backlash started 3 days after I hung up on her mother. At first it was subtle, one-word texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. Really? Why? She's still your kid. I ignored them. People love to play referee from the sidelines when they've never had to bleed on the field. But then the voicemail started. Her godmother called me crying, saying I'd hurt the family. My cousin left a message asking if I was having a breakdown. One old friend of my ex-wife even sent me a long-winded Facebook message telling me this was the moment that would haunt me on my deathbed. I didn't reply to any of them. Not because I couldn't argue. I could have, but because I didn't feel like defending a boundary I should have never had to draw in the first place. These people didn't know what it felt like to be erased. To hear your child rewrite you out of her story and then come back with her hand out like you were still standing in the same place she left you. They didn't know what it felt like to be tolerated like a bill that's been paid but not appreciated. The worst part wasn't the judgment. It was the way people tried to reframe her decision like it was a phase. She was just confused, they said. You know how close she is to her stepdad. That doesn't mean she doesn't love you. But that's the thing. I wasn't confused. I heard her loud and clear when she said, I want the day to be about my chosen family. She didn't stutter. She didn't hedge. She made a choice. And in making that choice, she asked me to step aside so she could celebrate without the burden of my presence. That wasn't confusion. That was a boundary of her own, one I honored. But now that the world didn't bend her way, now that rent and real life were knocking, suddenly I was expected to forget. Suddenly, I was the problem. The man who obeyed the line she drew was now being called heartless for not crossing it. I had played the role of the invisible father exactly the way she asked, and now I was being punished for not breaking character when it became inconvenient. The only person who really understood was my sister. She'd stayed out of it for a while, not because she didn't care, but because she knew I needed space. Then one evening she called, and for the first time in days, I didn't let it ring out. I heard what happened, she said quietly. I'm sure you did, I replied, bracing for another guilt trip. But she surprised me. I would have done the same thing, she said. You know that, right? I didn't answer right away. A lump formed in my throat. She kept talking. I remember how hard you worked when she was in college. You never even bought yourself new tires that winter. You used duct tape to seal that busted window in the truck because you didn't want to short her on textbooks. Yeah, I said, voice cracking. That was the year she stopped calling. I know, she said. And it broke my heart to watch you keep giving anyway. That's when I let it hit me. The grief. The truth of it. Not that I'd lost her, but that I'd lost so much of myself trying to be enough for someone who didn't want me anymore. My sister didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't try to explain my daughter's behavior or spin it into some future reconciliation fantasy. She just held space for the wreckage and let it be real. She didn't just distance herself, she said. She replaced you. That's what made it cruel. And I don't blame you for saying no. In fact, I respect you more for finally saying it. That call grounded me. I realized then that I wasn't just defending my decision. I was reclaiming my dignity. I'd been walking through the ashes of a role that had been stripped from me without ceremony or care. And now that I had the audacity to say no, the world wanted to paint me as vengeful. But I wasn't being vengeful. I was being free. Free of the guilt. Free of the cycle. free of the hope that maybe one day she'd see me again. Because that kind of hope is poison. It keeps you tethered to a door that's been locked from the other side for years. I started doing things I hadn't done in ages. I cleaned out my garage, finally replaced the passenger door on my truck, took myself to a movie alone, and actually enjoyed it. Not because I was happy, but because I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me feel like I mattered. The weight of it all was still there, don't get me wrong, but it didn't control me anymore. Every time the guilt crept in, I reminded myself, she asked me not to show up. She chose another man to stand beside her. She decided who mattered, and that was her right. But it was also mine to decide that I wouldn't keep sacrificing for someone who didn't even want to call me dad in public. The last message I got before I blocked the noise came from a mutual friend of my ex-wife's, someone who'd always kept one foot in both camps. She sent a short text, "I know you're hurting, but don't let pride keep you from being her dad." I stared at it for a long time before I deleted it. It wasn't pride. It was pain. And pain, when finally respected, looks a lot like silence. The silence after all the noise was its own kind of storm. For the first time in weeks, the calls stopped. The messages dried up. No one sent me links to her GoFundMe. No one guilted me into reconsidering. And in that quiet, I was left with only myself and the ghosts I'd been too busy to face. I thought silence would feel like peace. But it felt more like being dropped in the middle of an abandoned theater after the show had ended, with all the seats still warm and a single spotlight glowing on an empty stage. There's a difference between loneliness and aloneness, and I was learning that the hard way. I wasn't just alone, I was severed. From the title, from the role, from the identity that had once shaped the entire way I saw myself. I had spent over 2 decades being someone's father, and now I didn't know what I was. One afternoon, I found myself scrolling through old voicemails on my phone, messages I hadn't deleted over the years, even when they started to hurt more than they healed. The first one was from when she was 16. Her voice still had that girlish lilt to it, full of sarcasm and joy. "Dad, I left my sneakers in your truck again. If I fail gym tomorrow, it's your fault." "Just kidding. Kind of. Love you." I played that one twice, then moved on to one from freshman year of college. "Hey, I survived move-in day. Thanks for the snacks and the emergency quarters. You're the best. Seriously, I don't say it enough, but thank you. Love you, Dad." That one stung differently. I remembered standing in the dorm parking lot after hauling boxes in the August heat, watching her disappear through those heavy campus doors without looking back. I had told myself she was just excited, that she was finally stepping into the life I'd worked so hard to help her build. I hadn't expected that door to become a wall. The last voicemail I listened to was from her senior year. Short, clipped. "Got the rent money. Thanks. No, love you. No, how are you?" It had been the last message she left before the graduation call, the one that would reshape everything. I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, letting the silence fill the space those words used to occupy. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I just felt tired. Like my bones were carrying the weight of every time I'd been forgotten, overlooked, or treated like an obligation. I realized then that what I missed wasn't her. It was who she used to be. And more than that, who I used to be when I believed she still saw me. The hardest truth I had to face was this. I hadn't been her dad in years. I'd just been a wallet with a voice. A background character she called when something needed fixing. And when she found someone new to fill the emotional role, she phased me out like an expired subscription. I kept paying, though, because that's what fathers do, right? They stay, they give, they sacrifice, even when they're invisible. But there comes a point when staying becomes erasure, when giving becomes a wound you reopen every month. And I finally understood that I had been bleeding for someone who didn't even want a bandage from me, let alone my hand. People kept saying things like, "You'll always be her dad." But that's not true. Parenthood isn't just DNA or old pictures. It's presence. It's reciprocity. It's being seen, not tolerated, not edited out of the photos, not downgraded to some financial backup plan. I used to think being a parent was forever, but now I know it's only as permanent as the relationship you're given. And mine had expired long before that phone call. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. I started finding small ways to reclaim the pieces of myself I'd lost. I took weekend drives to nowhere, letting the road decide where I stopped. I signed up for a woodworking class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. I even bought a used camera and started taking photos again, sunsets, old barns, strangers on park benches. For the first time in years, I was creating something that had nothing to do with being someone's dad. I was just me, with rough hands and a quiet mind and too many thoughts that finally had space to breathe. Every now and then, I'd think about what I might say to her if she ever reached out again. Not in a fantasy where we made up and everything went back to the way it was, that was long gone, but in the reality where she might try to rewrite things again. I'd tell her this: you don't get to shatter someone's place in your life and then ask them to rebuild it when you're cold and need shelter. I loved you with everything I had. I just finally learned that love isn't supposed to feel like begging, and I would mean every word. There was one night, late, stormy, restless, when I pulled out the old photo albums. I hadn't touched them in years. There she was, with missing teeth and glittery shoes, holding a sign that said first day of kindergarten. Me behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding a juice box. There were birthdays, vacations, piano recitals. So many smiles. So much time. I let myself smile, just for a moment. Not because I wanted it back, but because I was proud of what I gave. Even if she didn't see it. Even if she never would. Some things don't need fixing. Some stories don't need rewriting. They just need to end. It came on a Tuesday morning, quiet, without fanfare. I was halfway through a cup of coffee, reading a book I hadn't touched in years, when I noticed the email. Her name sat there in my inbox like it had never left, like nothing had changed. Just the subject line, "Hope you're happy." I stared at it for a full minute, unmoving. My first instinct was to delete it. The second was to open it and brace myself. I did neither, not right away. Instead, I sat back, let the mug warm my hands, and allowed myself to breathe. There was no fear, no dread, just a strange calm, like watching a wave you no longer feel obligated to dive under. Eventually, I clicked. The message wasn't long. No apology, no direct ask, just a summary of things I already knew. She'd moved into graduate housing, found a part-time job, was figuring things out. Then the final line, "I don't agree with how you handled this, but I hope you're happy." That was it. No warmth, no venom, just distance. A polite arm's length. A white flag without color. I read it twice, then closed the tab and leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The leaves were starting to change. The world kept spinning, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the urge to respond. Not out of resentment, but because there was nothing left to say. It's a strange thing, closure. People act like it's supposed to be mutual, like both sides sit across from each other, spill their hearts, and walk away healed. But real closure is quieter than that. Sometimes it comes in silence. Sometimes it looks like reading the words someone meant as an olive branch and realizing you don't need to pick it up. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her failure. But I also didn't wish to step back into a role that had cost me more than it ever gave. She had made her choices. I had made mine. And this time, I was standing firm. I thought about all the people who'd called me selfish, who'd said I was acting out of pride, that I should rise above and do what a real father would do. But here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Being a parent doesn't mean being a martyr. It doesn't mean letting someone carve out your worth and then demand your service like a subscription. It doesn't mean swallowing every insult, every slight, every erasure, just so you can be present for the next round. It means loving with limits. And I had reached mine. I gave her the best years of my life. Gave her food, shelter, guidance, money, time. My time, the most irreplaceable gift of all. And in return, she gave me absence. She gave me a stage I wasn't welcome on, a title she reassigned, and a voice she stopped hearing. There are people who will never understand why I said no, who think the job of a parent is endless, unconditional, immune to disappointment. But those people never sat where I sat. They never watched their daughter point to another man and say, "That's my real dad," while your chest caved in like a house collapsing from the inside. They never turned off a graduation live stream halfway through because the person they sacrificed everything for couldn't even spare a mention. Those people believe love is about endurance. I believe it's about balance. And when one person carries everything, that's not love. It's servitude. I started traveling more. Little trips. Quiet towns. I went to Vermont in the fall, watched the trees turn red and gold. I hiked trails I'd only seen in postcards. I learned how to cook something other than frozen meals. I sat in coffee shops reading poetry I hadn't touched since I was young. I re-met myself, not as a father, or an ex-husband, or someone's emotional punching bag, but as a man who deserved peace. I had spent so long living for someone else that I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. And it didn't take much. Just a quiet afternoon. A mountain view. A chair in the sun. The world didn't ask me to be anything other than present. And that was enough. Sometimes people think walking away is the same as giving up. But that's not true. Walking away is still walking. It's still movement. Still purpose. Still choosing a direction. And I chose myself. Not in bitterness, not in revenge, but in quiet self-preservation. I didn't slam the door. I just stopped holding it open for someone who had already walked away. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is the cleanest kind of freedom. She may write again someday. Or not. Maybe I'll hear from her when she's older, when life has humbled her in the way life humbles all of us eventually. But if she does, she'll be meeting a different man. A man who no longer defines himself by what he gives away, but by what he chooses to keep. A man who no longer waits for apologies that may never come. Who no longer wears the label of father like a crown made of thorns. Who knows that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is your distance. And if she never reaches out again, that's okay too. Because I gave her the best of me. And I finally gave myself the rest. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved just to protect your peace? Share your story in the comments. This isn't just about a father and daughter. It's about all of us who've drawn the line when love stopped being mutual. If this story moved you, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about real people setting real boundaries. Because sometimes, walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. See you soon in the next story.